Natural English. The secret method that nobody explains to you. Learn much faster. What if you've been learning English the wrong way all along? In this video, we'll uncover the hidden truth behind natural English acquisition, a method that nobody ever explains, but that fluent speakers use without even realizing it. Forget grammar drills and boring memorization. Discover how to absorb English the way your brain was designed to, through rhythm, emotion, and context. Whether you're a beginner or stuck in the intermediate plateau, this is the missing piece to finally unlock fluency. Fast, naturally, and without fear. Start now. The change begins here. You've probably been taught that learning English means memorizing grammar rules, drilling endless verb tenses, and repeating artificial dialogues from a textbook. Day after day, notebook after notebook, chasing the illusion that one day, magically, it will all click. But it doesn't. Not really. And you know that, deep down. There's a reason why so many learners spend years stuck in the same place. They understand the language, they recognize the words. But when it's time to speak, their mind goes blank. They freeze. And it's not because they're not smart enough. It's not because they didn't try hard. It's because the method was broken from the start. Traditional language learning is like trying to learn how to swim by reading about it. You can study every stroke, every breathing technique, every safety tip. But the second you're thrown into the water, your body panics. That's what happens in real-life conversations. All that grammar and vocabulary you memorized, it's there, but it's passive. It doesn't come alive when you need it most. Why? Because traditional study creates language knowledge, not language experience. We've been conditioned to think of language as something academic, something you store in your brain like math formulas. But that's not how your brain naturally learns to communicate. Think about it. Did you learn your first language by filling out grammar worksheets? Did your parents hand you a textbook when you were a toddler? No. You learned by listening, by watching, by feeling. Language entered your brain through emotion, rhythm, repetition, and real context. And that's the key. Traditional study methods ignore this completely. They treat language as information to be mastered, not as music to be absorbed. The truth is, many people give up on English not because they lack discipline, but because they feel like something's wrong with them. They think, I've studied for so long, but I still can't speak naturally. Maybe I'm not good at languages. But the failure isn't yours. The failure is in the approach. The traditional method is built for tests, not conversations, for checking boxes, not building confidence. And let's be honest, even when you pass a test, does it make you feel fluent? No. You feel like an actor trying to remember your lines. You hesitate. You translate. You doubt. And that hesitation kills fluency. Real fluency isn't memorized. It flows. And that flow only comes when you stop studying English like a subject and start living it like a rhythm. The worst part is that nobody tells you this. Schools don't teach it. Apps rarely focus on it. YouTube videos give you tricks, but not the shift you truly need. That's why this method feels like a secret. But it's not magic. It's just natural. And once you see the trap for what it is, you can step out of it and finally start learning in a way that sticks. The trap of traditional study is silent but powerful. It tricks you into believing that progress equals pages filled, or hours spent memorizing lists. But real progress doesn't feel like study. It feels like connection, like recognition, like something clicking inside you without effort. That's the moment you stop fearing English and start feeling it. So if you've ever felt stuck, frustrated, or ashamed of your English, this is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new one. The moment you decide to unlearn what never worked and rediscover what always did. Your brain already knows how to learn a language. You've done it before. Now it's time to do it again, naturally. Long before you ever spoke your first words, your brain was already listening. From the moment you were born, maybe even before, you were immersed in sound. Not meaning, not grammar, not vocabulary. Just rhythm, tone, and melody. Your brain didn't ask for translations. It didn't ask for explanations. It absorbed. It observed. It tuned in. And that's how every human being learns their first language. Not through logic, but through sound. So why do we ignore this when learning a second one? We're told that language is a system of rules. Past tense, future perfect, irregular verbs, conditionals. We get a textbook and we're expected to build a language from the ground up, like a puzzle. But that's not how your brain works. That's how machines learn languages. Humans? We learn by feeling the music of speech, the pauses, the stresses, the flow. We learn by imitation, not construction. And this matters more than you think. Think of a song you love in a language you don't speak. You may not know what the lyrics mean, but you can feel the emotion. You remember the rhythm. You even hum along. That's the power of sound. It bypasses logic and goes straight to your emotional memory. Now imagine if English had been taught to you like music, not math. Imagine if you had learned intonation before interpretation, flow before form. Everything would be different. Native speakers don't think in grammar. They think in sound patterns. They've heard phrases thousands of times, in context, in real situations. Their brain stores these patterns as chunks, not rules. When they say, "I'm gonna go," they're not conjugating the verb to go in their head. They're pulling from a sound memory. And you can do the same. But first, you have to unlearn the obsession with rules and start listening with your whole brain. This is why so many learners struggle with speaking. They know the grammar, they've memorized the vocabulary, but they've never felt the sound. So when it's time to talk, they hesitate, they translate, they break the flow, not because they're slow, but because they've never trained their ears. And without the ears, the mouth stays frozen. Fluency is not about saying things perfectly. It's about saying things naturally. And that starts with sound. When you hear real English, not classroom English, but street English, emotional English, messy English, your brain begins to recognize the rhythm, the stress, the music behind the meaning. And slowly it adapts. You begin to anticipate patterns. You speak without planning. You react, not recite. That's real fluency. But here's the secret most learners never hear. You can train your brain to do this at any age. You don't have to be a child. You just have to change the way you approach learning. Instead of focusing on what a sentence means, focus on how it feels. Where does the speaker pause? Where do they go up or down in pitch? When do they speed up or slow down? This is the invisible language that drives communication. And once you master it, grammar becomes secondary. When babies learn to speak, they don't need explanations. They listen, mimic, repeat. And over time, they internalize the structure without even knowing it. Adults can do the same, but only if we're willing to trust the process, to stop overthinking, to surrender control. That's scary for some, but it's also liberating. Because once you realize that language lives in sound, not in rules, you free yourself from the pressure to be perfect and step into a rhythm that was always there, waiting for you. This is the step most learners skip. They jump into books before they've trained their ears. They chase accuracy before they've absorbed fluency. And as a result, they always feel behind. But once you flip the script, once you decide to listen first, speak second, everything changes. You're not building English from scratch anymore. You're tuning into a frequency that's already playing. So stop trying to memorize the rules of English. Start listening to the music of it. Because language is sound before it's structure. Always has been. Always will be. What if the secret to speaking better English wasn't speaking at all? What if the breakthrough you've been chasing doesn't come from forcing output, but from mastering the art of input? Most learners think that to improve their English, they need to speak more, write more, push more. But that's a trap, because you can't produce what you haven't absorbed. Think about it. When a child is born, they spend months, even years, just listening. No pressure to speak. No grammar corrections. No vocabulary quizzes. Just input, sound, emotion, context. And then one day, without warning, they speak. Not perfectly, but naturally. That's not a miracle. That's neurological design. The brain is wired to acquire language through input first, output later. But most English learners flip this process. They rush to speak. They feel guilty for not producing. They're told to practice more, speak every day, force it. And that creates anxiety, blocks, and burnout. The truth is, you don't get fluent by speaking more. You get fluent by understanding more, deeply, effortlessly, repeatedly. That's the revolution. Let's break it down. There are two kinds of learning: acquisition and study. Study is conscious. It's when you memorize, analyze, try to remember. But acquisition? That's unconscious. It's when your brain picks up patterns without trying. And acquisition only happens through input. Not just any input, but comprehensible, compelling, and consistent input. That's the formula. Imagine your brain like a sponge. If it's dry, you can squeeze it all you want, but nothing will come out. Input is the water. The more you absorb, the more naturally output will happen. Without stress, without pressure, without fear. You won't need to search for words. They'll be there, ready, because you've heard them 1,000 times in meaningful ways. But not all input is created equal. Random listening doesn't help much if you're not understanding what you hear. This is why comprehensible input is the key. Content that's slightly above your current level, just enough to challenge you, but still clear enough to follow, activates your brain's pattern recognition system. That's where the magic happens. That's where fluency grows. Then there's the second ingredient: compelling input. If it bores you, it won't stick. Your brain learns best when it's engaged. That's why songs, stories, vlogs, scenes from movies, they work. Not because they're educational, but because they're emotional. They pull you in. They make you care. And when you care, your brain remembers. Finally, the most forgotten piece: consistency. Not intensity, not perfection. Just showing up every day, letting English exist in your world, even if it's just 15 minutes. That's the true revolution. Making English not a task, but a presence. A part of your daily rhythm, like music in the background of your life. That's how fluency becomes inevitable. You don't need to talk more. You need to listen better, read more, absorb more. Your brain will do the rest. Silently, steadily, naturally. That's what native speakers did. That's what you did with your first language. And that's what works. Always has. The input revolution is not about doing more. It's about trusting more. Trusting that your brain is capable. That language is a process, not a performance. That your silence isn't a failure, it's preparation. Every hour of input is a brick in the foundation of fluency. And one day, when it's ready, your voice will rise. Not because you forced it, but because you fed it. So stop blaming yourself for not speaking perfectly. Start feeding your brain with the English it craves, with the stories, the sounds, the feelings that make language real. This is the quiet work, the invisible growth, the revolution nobody sees, but everyone hears in the end. Most English learners spend years focusing on the words, but completely miss the music. They memorize vocabulary lists. They learn the meaning of each word. They even master pronunciation. in isolation. But when they speak, something still feels off. Something is missing. And they don't know what it is. They feel like they're doing everything right, but they're still not being understood. Or worse, they're being understood, but they don't sound natural. That missing piece is rhythm, the hidden code behind real fluency. English is not just a collection of words. It's a living rhythm, a flow, a melody. And if you speak with the right words but the wrong rhythm, people will feel like something's not quite right, even if they can't explain why. This rhythm is what makes native speech sound fast, smooth, effortless. It's not the vocabulary, it's not the grammar, it's the pattern behind the speech, and most learners never even hear it. Think about music. You can play all the right notes, but if you ignore the tempo, the pauses, the timing, the music dies. It sounds mechanical. That's what happens when someone speaks English without rhythm. You're technically correct, but emotionally disconnected. You don't capture attention. You don't create impact. You just speak. But rhythm brings your English to life. So what is rhythm in English? It's the way we stress certain words, reduce others, link sounds, pause naturally, and ride the emotional wave of the sentence. It's what makes "do you want to" become "do you wanna." It's what makes "what are you doing" sound like "what you doing." It's the difference between textbook English and real communication. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. It's everywhere. This rhythm isn't random. It follows predictable patterns. English is a stress-timed language, which means that some syllables are longer and louder than others. In a sentence, we stress content words, the ones that carry meaning, and we reduce function words, the ones that glue the sentence together. That creates a beat, a cadence, a rhythm, like a drum beat under every phrase. But here's the problem. Traditional teaching ignores this. You're taught to pronounce every word clearly, to articulate each syllable. And while that may sound polite, it's not how native speakers talk. It's not how rhythm works. So you end up sounding robotic, careful, overthinking every word. That breaks the flow. And when the flow is broken, so is the connection. To speak naturally, you have to feel the beat of the language. You have to listen not just for meaning, but for movement. Where does the voice rise? Where does it fall? When do we pause? When do we glide? It's like dancing with your voice. And it's this dance that makes English truly understandable and truly beautiful. Rhythm is what allows native speakers to speak fast and still be clear. Because even if they drop sounds or slur words, the rhythm stays consistent. It's the skeleton of the sentence. It carries the message. And when you tune into that rhythm, everything gets easier. Listening becomes clearer. Speaking becomes smoother. Confidence replaces confusion. The best part? You can train this. You don't need talent. You need repetition with awareness. You need to shadow native speakers, mimic their music, exaggerate their patterns. Not just the words, the delivery. Watch shows. Repeat scenes. Feel the rhythm in your body. Speak like you're playing a role. That's how you internalize the code. This is what most learners never hear. They think fluency is about knowing more, but it's about sounding right, feeling right. And rhythm is the doorway. Once you get this, you start to speak with emotion, with confidence, with identity. You're not just speaking English, you're owning it. So if your English still feels stuck even after years of study, ask yourself, have I been learning the music or just the lyrics? Because the secret is not in knowing every word. The secret is in making every word dance. Imagine if there was a method so powerful, so natural, and so effective at making you speak real, confident English, but almost no one uses it. Not because it doesn't work, but because it's so simple, so raw, so direct, that traditional teachers don't even know how to explain it. That method is called shadowing, and it's one of the biggest secrets behind the people who sound fluent fast. Shadowing is not about repeating words after hearing them. It's about becoming the voice you hear. You listen to a native speaker, a podcast, a dialogue, a video clip, and at the same time, you speak with them. You don't wait. You don't pause. You copy the rhythm, the tone, the pronunciation, the breath, everything. It's not about what they're saying. It's about how they're saying it. In the beginning, it feels impossible. You miss words, you stumble, you fall behind. And that's exactly the point. Shadowing forces your brain to operate under pressure, to catch the flow in real time. It pushes you beyond comfort and into performance. It rewires your mouth, your ears, your memory. It teaches you the rhythm from the inside out. Traditional methods ask you to memorize dialogues. Shadowing asks you to become the dialogue, not in theory, in practice. It's like language weightlifting. Every time you shadow, you're building muscle memory for fluency. Your tongue learns where to move. Your breathing syncs with the sentence. Your brain stops translating and starts flowing. The reason most people don't use it? Because it feels awkward. It's messy. It's not academic. It doesn't look productive. You're just repeating sounds. You're not writing. You're not filling in blanks. But that mess is exactly what fluency feels like in the making. And the people who push through that stage, they rise. Fast. Shadowing trains your ear to catch the real English. Not the slow, clean version from apps, but the raw, connected, emotional English from real life. The kind you'll hear in conversations, interviews, movies. The kind that textbooks can't prepare you for. And once your brain is used to hearing and echoing that kind of English, everything starts to change. You begin to notice patterns, how questions rise, how statements fall, how emotion lives in the tone. You start to feel when something sounds natural or off. That's intuition, not rules. And intuition is the foundation of fluent speech. The more you shadow, the more you trust that instinct. The more your confidence grows. Not because you learned more, but because you embodied more. The beautiful part? You don't need a teacher, you don't need a course, you just need your voice and a source of real English. It could be a scene from a movie, a clip from YouTube, a TED Talk, a podcast. Play it again, and again, until your voice merges with theirs. Until you're not just repeating, you're performing. And here's what's magical. One day, you'll be in a real conversation, and a phrase will come out of your mouth, perfectly, naturally, without effort. You won't know how. You won't remember studying it. That's shadowing. That's the moment your practice turns into presence. So if you're tired of studying English and still sounding like a student, stop studying. Start shadowing. Stop aiming for perfect grammar and start aiming for real delivery. That's what native-like fluency feels like. That's how you unlock your true English voice. Not by writing it, not by thinking it, by living it in real time. Shadowing is not a trick. It's a habit. And if you make it part of your rhythm, your transformation is just a matter of time. You'll start to hear differently, speak differently, feel differently, and the English you've been chasing will finally sound like you. Everyone wants to speak English fluently. That's the dream, the goal, the obsession. But in the rush to speak, most people forget something essential, something that fluent speakers understand deeply. Before you can speak with power, confidence, and rhythm, you must first master the art of listening. Not passive listening, not distracted background noise, but deep, active, intentional listening. Because listening is not the opposite of speaking. It's the engine behind it. Let's break a myth right now. Speaking more does not automatically make you fluent. You can speak broken English for years and still feel stuck, still feel insecure, still feel fake. Why? Because you're producing words you've never really absorbed. They're not internalized. They're not connected to feeling, rhythm, emotion. They're just words. But when you listen, really listen, something different happens. You're not just learning vocabulary, you're hearing intonation, stress, timing, flow, emotion. You're learning how English breathes. And the more you expose yourself to this living, breathing language, the more your brain begins to recognize patterns, without effort, without translation, without study. Listening is the foundation of every fluent speaker. Think of actors who learn a new accent, musicians who pick up a new style, children who learn a second language at home. They all start the same way. Immersion through listening. No pressure, no fear, just exposure, over and over, until the sounds become familiar, until the rhythm becomes instinct, until the responses become automatic. But let's be clear, not all listening is created equal. You can't just play English podcasts in the background while scrolling your phone and expect results. That's noise, not input. To grow, you need comprehensible listening. Content that's just slightly above your level, but still understandable. And more than that, it has to be compelling, interesting, emotional, real. When you're emotionally connected to what you hear, your brain pays attention. It retains more. It creates deeper neural pathways. That's why a powerful scene from a movie sticks with you more than a vocabulary list. That's why a funny podcast clip makes you remember phrases without even trying. You felt something, and emotion activates memory. Listening also breaks the fear of real conversations. Most learners panic in live situations not because they don't know English, but because they're not used to hearing it in real time. They expect perfect pronunciation, slow speech, clean grammar. But native speakers talk fast. They reduce words. They skip sounds. And if you haven't trained your ear, you freeze. The solution isn't more speaking. It's better listening. You need to flood your brain with real English. Watch interviews. Listen to unscripted conversations. Pay attention to how people actually talk. And listen actively. Repeat phrases. Pause and predict. Replay scenes. Shadow what you hear. Feel the language in your body, not just your brain. And here's what's wild. When you listen deeply, your speaking improves. Without even trying. You begin to use phrases you never studied. You remember expressions just because you heard them 100 times. You start to sound natural. Not because you practiced grammar, but because you trained your ear. This is the path most learners skip. They want quick wins, fast results. But the fastest path is actually the quiet path, the listening path, the one that doesn't look impressive. But over time, it builds the strongest fluency, the kind that lasts, the kind that feels effortless. Listening is not passive, it's powerful, it's transformative. It's the daily practice of soaking your mind in the language until it becomes your second nature. And when that happens, speaking stops being a performance. It becomes expression. Real, raw, natural expression. So if you've been stuck, frustrated, lost in grammar and speaking drills, stop, step back, and listen. Really listen. Because listening is the new speaking. And once you embrace that, you'll finally understand what it means to be fluent. From the inside out. Most people think learning English is about effort, hours of study, tons of grammar rules, memorizing verbs, repeating vocabulary. But what if I told you that the most powerful change doesn't start in your mouth or your brain? It starts in your mindset. That the difference between people who stay stuck for years and those who break through in months isn't intelligence. It's not resources. It's the way they see the process, the way they see themselves. If you still see yourself as a student of English, you'll act like one. You'll wait for permission. You'll feel small in every conversation. You'll doubt yourself before you even speak. You'll look for approval, correction, validation. That mindset creates hesitation, and hesitation kills fluency. Every single time. Now imagine this instead. What if you saw yourself as someone who already uses English? Not perfectly, not fluently, but actively, daily, confidently. What if your mistakes weren't proof of failure, but evidence of growth? What if your goal wasn't perfection, but connection? That shift changes everything. Because fluency doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from believing differently. Fluent speakers aren't fearless. They just move through fear. They expect discomfort. They embrace confusion. They know mistakes will happen, and they keep going anyway. That mindset doesn't wait. It creates. It shows up before it feels ready. It acts before it feels perfect. Because it understands something deeper. Language is not a test. It's a tool. This is the mindset of real transformation. The people who succeed in English aren't better than you. They just stopped seeing English as a school subject. They started seeing it as a life skill, a bridge, a key, a way to access more of the world. They listen to music in English, not for practice, but for pleasure. They watch movies not to study them, but to live inside them. They speak because they have something to say, not to pass an exam. You have to shift your focus from outcome to identity, from trying to sound fluent to being someone who expresses themselves with joy, clarity, and freedom. That doesn't happen overnight, but it happens faster than you think. The moment you stop fighting your current level and start using it as your playground. Every mistake is a teacher. Every awkward sentence is a step. Every conversation is a gym. That's how growth works. Not in silence, not in perfection, but in motion. And this mindset, this bold, expressive, curious mindset, creates something even more powerful than fluency. It creates authenticity. When you shift your mindset, the fear of judgment fades. You stop comparing yourself to others. You stop asking, "Am I good enough?" and start asking, "What can I learn from this moment?" You stop waiting. You start owning. This is not just about English. It's about unlocking a part of you that's been quiet for too long. A part that wants to connect, to express, to be heard. And the moment you say yes to that part, everything changes. Fluency becomes a side effect of courage. Confidence becomes the reward for showing up. And English stops being a barrier. It becomes a mirror, reflecting back the version of you that's been ready all along. So if you've made it this far, you already have what it takes. You're not missing grammar. You're not missing talent. You're not missing time. You're missing the mindset that says, "I belong here. I can do this. And I will speak, not someday, but now." Because this is your moment. And the only permission you need to become fluent is the one you give yourself.